All right, welcome. If you're gearing up for the Queensland bar exam, you're going to want to pay close attention. We're about to tackle a really crucial topic, UCPR Rule 389. It's all about delay, and trust me, this is a rule that not only comes up all the time, but it also says a lot about you as a practitioner. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll talk about delay itself, what I'm calling the sleeping case file. Then, we'll hit the two critical timelines you have to know. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of arguing for leave to proceed and the factors the court looks at. And we'll wrap up with some really common traps to watch out for, like what counts as a step and the ever-present threat of a strikeout.
All right, Section 1. Delay the sleeping case file. So let's start by getting our heads around the basic problem that Rule 389 is trying to fix. And it really is about what happens when a case just goes dormant.
So, picture this, because it happens more than you'd think. Your case has just been sitting there totally dormant for over 2 years. What do you do now? Maybe you inherited the file, maybe things just slipped through the cracks. Whatever the reason, your case is now procedurally stuck in the mud. Rule 389 is basically the rule book for how you get it moving again. And you really need to understand the court's attitude on this. They see this kind of delay as an unfortunate reflection of the lack of diligence of litigants and their solicitors. So in their eyes, it's not just some minor procedural hiccup, it's a serious problem. This rule isn't a friendly suggestion. It's the court's main weapon for dealing with these sleeping files and making sure justice doesn't just grind to a halt. Okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts. Section 2, the two critical timelines. Now, this is the part you absolutely positively have to have down cold for the exam. It's all about these two key time periods. So, the rule sets up this really clear two-tier system. Tier 1 is the 1-year delay. If a year goes by with no action, it's pretty straightforward. You just have to give all the other parties 1 month's notice that you're about to get things moving again. Simple. But if you hit the 2-year mark, that's a whole different story. Now you can't take any new step without getting an order from the court first. You need their permission, their leave. And that means you've got to go and actively convince a judge to let your case proceed. Which brings us to Section 3, arguing for leave to proceed. So you've crossed that 2-year line. How do you actually go about convincing the court to let you continue? This is where your advocacy skills are really put to the test.
And this quote from Justice Chesterman in Louisville really nails it. He said, "The proper approach is to identify the relevant factors, assess the weight, and then to determine whether, on balance, there's good reason for making the order." What he's saying is, this isn't a checklist. You can't just tick a few boxes and get your order. It's a discretionary balancing act. Your job is to put all the relevant factors on the scales and convince the judge that they tip in your client's favor.
And let's be absolutely clear about this. The onus is 100% on you, the applicant. The other side will probably argue they've been prejudiced by the delay. Sure. But it is your job to satisfy the court that the case should be allowed to proceed. The burden of proof is squarely on your shoulders.
Okay, so what exactly are these relevant factors we're talking about? Let's get into Section 4, the court's deciding factors. This is the stuff the court is actually going to be weighing up.
Now, the key case here is Tyler v. Custom Credit, and it gives us this incredibly useful list of factors. Think of this as the framework for building your argument. You've got to be ready to talk about things like, do you have a satisfactory explanation for the delay? How strong is your client's actual case? What are their prospects of success? And a huge one, has the delay prejudiced the defendant so much that a fair trial just isn't possible anymore? And just remember, this is a guide, not a complete list. The court can consider other things too.
And this quote, also from the Tyler case, really explains the why behind the whole rule. Justice Atkinson pointed out that unnecessary delay has a tendency to bring the legal system into disrepute. This isn't just about one slow case. It's about the bigger picture. Long delays make the whole justice system look bad. And more importantly, they make it harder to get a fair and just result. That's the core policy driver here.
All right, last section. Section 5, traps, steps, and strikeouts. We're going to finish up by looking at a couple of major traps that can catch you out. Getting these wrong can completely sink your application or even your entire case. First up, you have to know what the rules mean by a step in a proceeding, because not everything you do counts. And this is a big one. Rule 3893 says that an application where no order is actually made by the court is not a step. This is so important because if you get it wrong, you could completely miscalculate your timeline. You might think the clock reset, but it didn't, and suddenly you're in that 2-year danger zone without even realizing it.
So, let's make this super clear. What counts as a step? Something that actually advances the proceeding between the parties. So, serving your list of documents on the other side, yep, that's a step.
it moves the ball forward. But what's not a step? Just filing that same list of documents with the court without serving it, that doesn't count. Or, as we just saw, making an application where the court doesn't end up making an order. The key is that it has to be an action that pushes the litigation along.
And this leads us to the biggest danger of all. Very often, when you file your application for leave to proceed, the other side will come right back at you with an application of their own to have your case struck out entirely for want of prosecution. The court will usually hear both applications at the same time, so you end up in this high-stakes showdown where you're fighting to bring the case back to life and they're fighting to kill it off for good.
So what's the bottom line here? Delay isn't always fatal to a case, but having to ask the court for its indulgence, well, it's always a gamble. You're putting your client's case on a line, and with that threat of a strikeout always looming, can your client really afford that risk? The real takeaway, especially for those of you heading to the bar, is that diligence from day one is everything. The best way to win a Rule 389 application is to never have to make one in the first place.